Alright, so Season 4 is finally here. We've talked about everything that you can see content-wise coming in the Everything You Need to Know video recently and a reveal video last week. So today, we're going to be talking more about the gameplay changes made in multiplayer, zombies, and Warzone rather than the content itself. So buckle up because we've got a lot to talk about. In full transparency, I am not at my desk here for this update and won't be all weekend, so stealth changes, leaks, Easter eggs, whatever that could come out of this, we won't be able to get back to this until early next week. And additionally, it's very likely, as with every single update seasonally, that something will break with this. So if you're having issues, you're probably not alone. Happens every single update. But wanted to get this out there in the open sooner rather than later. So it makes sense if I can't comment on anything here in videos or anything. But anyways, let's talk about multiplayer. Firstly, let's start out with some things in the UI. One thing that I actually really enjoyed was the detailed death recap now rolling into Black Ops 6 from Warzone. This, like we saw in Warzone the last season and a half or so, I forget when they introduced it, it'll now end up showcasing in your kill cam what gave you away, how somebody knew where you were, and so on and so forth. Things like live pings, UAVs, unsuppressed weapons, body shields, sleeper agent, scout pulse, proximity alarms, and signal lures will all end up showcasing here for this in Black Ops 6, which I think is a really nice thing to have. The more information you have at your disposal, the more accurate and understanding you can have of the situation at hand. And yes, while cheaters do persist, this is one of those things that I think gives a clearer picture that sometimes that knee-jerk reaction of, this guy's cheating, listen, I do it too, but I'm happy to see this coming over that can now hopefully mitigate some of those situations. Additionally, one thing that's a bummer is that theater mode was temporarily disabled with this update, where they said it was due to an issue with loading replays, but they also gave no time frame on its return, which is unfortunate. So fingers crossed, but anyways, that was adjusted with this update as well. Now let's talk about weapon tuning, because there is a ton of it here at this, but there are key improvements that you'll see, and to save some time up front, save some monotony of saying this every single time individually with the statistics and what they do, things like your marksman foregrip, combat, and heavy stocks, they got buffs and improvements across the board when it came to flinch and view kick mitigations. So again, to save the time of naming off every single one and what they did on specific weapons, you'll see those on screen, but it's all kind of a uniform blanket buff of an update. And as always, full detailed patch notes on screen, but verbally, to keep things rolling, we're going to keep it brief in talking about each individual weapon. The XM4, we saw the CHF barrel get a buff to the recoil, making it more manageable. Then, again, those big three attachments got buffs. The AK-74 had an increase to the damage ranges, buffing those and giving more potential at a distance, but then buffing the CHF barrel and marksman foregrips. The AIMS 85 saw a buff to the heavy and combat stocks. The mid-range damage for the GPR 91 was removed, and the max damage range was buffed, along with buff to the CHF barrel and the marksman foregrips. The Model L saw buffs to the CHF barrel and marksman foregrip. The Goblin Mark II, all of those big three again, marksman foregrip, heavy, and combat stock, all buffed. The AS Val saw medium range damage, slight buff, nothing too crazy, but something that was a buff no less. The Krieg C, the big three attachments, marksman grip, heavy, and combat stock, all saw buffs. The Cypher 91, probably starting to see the picture here at this one, right? The big three attachments got buffs. The Kilo saw a marksman grip buff, but also increased the general view kick strength, which is a nerf to the Kilo slightly. Same thing with the CR56 AMAX, increasing that view kick strength to give a bit more of a nerf, but also increase that marksman foregrips attributes, making it a direct counter for this on both the AMAX and the Kilo. The C9 for your SMGs saw a heavy stock buff. The KSV, the big three, all of those got buffs. The marksman foregrip got a buff on the Tonto 22. The PP919 saw a heavy and combat stock buff. The Jackal PDW, the marksman foregrip, got a buff. The SOG, big three, all three of those got them. The PPSH, marksman foregrip only buff. The Ladra, all three. The ASG 89 saw a combat and heavy stock buff. The Maelstrom actually got, even down to the percentages, the exact same adjustments to a T. Then your LMGs, you're going to see that these are basically all the same sort of thing again. Mobility adjustments that are buffs, things like your movement speed, sprinting move speed, ADS movement speed, and ADS firing movement speeds have all been buffed, while their view kick strength and deviation has been increased, meaning that it's a bit more visual recoil. The amount of shake and such that you end up seeing with that, but the amount of which and the degree to which all vary in number based on each individual weapon, but the class itself had pretty uniform adjustments across the board. Your marksman rifles kind of got a split decision here with this. You saw the burst weapons have a cooldown time reduction, meaning the fire rates will be buffed, while some weapons like the Sarkov, DM10, and TR2 all have adjustments to the big three attachments in some capacity for their weapon tuning. And finally, the D13 or Dissector addressed an issue with projectiles firing into the water. And this one, not so much a buff or a nerf, but rather a fix to how it should perform at its base. We saw a couple of things changed in terms of like firing range for the maps. There were adjustments to the starting spawns for search and destroy. Free-for-all spawn logic was adjusted. Infected had an issue with a loadout, preventing the first infected player from accessing that. That was fixed out. Audio changes, we saw some voice lines missing from several operators that have been fixed, and a few other more minor things. On the zombie side of things here, grief, of course, was that big thing that we saw in regards to content. No new map this season, unfortunately, may be coming in Season 5. But beyond that, we did see some things in terms of gameplay with some minor adjustments to Terminus and Citadel de Mor. We saw a fix for Quick Revive where it would not default to the first slot of your perks regardless of when it was obtained. That should now be fixed. You saw a couple of things addressed with Elemental Pop as well. The C4 had a minimum damage increase to 70 and a max damage increase to 250, making it a bit more lethal. The frag grenade's mid damage sort of radius was increased to 150, and the Semtex's inner damage was increased to 250. Weapon buffs, we saw these go to the Strider, 9mm PM, Grakova, Sarkov, DM10, and TR2. All of these just more so buffing either things like your Pack-a-Punch critical damage, ADS speeds, gun scaling, penetration, things like that, but all buffs across the board here on all of those weapons. Warzone, this is something that now we start to see a lot more in regards to genuine changes and things that you might notice in the actual gameplay, like in the moment. But first, there was a note from the team at Raven where they said, moving forward, they've made the decision to test new gameplay features in limited time modes before bringing them into our core Battle Royale experience. This approach will allow us to continue exploring fresh ideas and mechanics in a controlled environment, giving players a taste of what's possible, while ensuring that we preserve the core identity that we believe defines our Battle Royale. It's all about finding that right balance between innovation and staying true to what makes the mode special. With that said, we have a handful of new features that we'll deploy at Season 4's launch and later into the season that we hope players enjoy. We'll be keeping a close eye on feedback as we go to determine which will make the cut to be added as a part of our core Battle Royale offering. So instead of things being thrown in the mix here and having like a half season for them to be either received as good or bad, we're going to see them instead start to be added into LTMs, which may last a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We don't quite know, but it's something that's a bit more sort of retained in a specialized environment at that point. So that's an interesting one here for sure. But as for our playlist, starting out with the Season 4 update, we have Battle Royale duos and quads, Resurgence solos through quads, so solos, duos, trios, and quads, Plunder quads, ranked trios, Clash, and interestingly, and to the distaste of a lot of the community, Battle Royale casual solos and quads. So the only way that you can play solos for the time being is in Battle Royale casual, which some people may love, but others may absolutely hate. This absolutely stirred up a little bit of an argument here as of yesterday when it was announced before the update went live, but it's one of those things that personally, I'm curious where you stand on this type of thing. But not to dwell too long on that, let's talk about the weapon tuning here. Because again, we did see a lot of the same sort of things happening within Warzone as it did in Black Ops 6, where a lot of those things like the marksman, the heavy, and combat stocks all got a lot of adjustments. But in Warzone, we also did see more stuff than just those as opposed to what we saw in Black Ops 6, where like that was probably the bulk of the changes just on a number of different weapons. You're going to see they're there a lot, but it's not the main thing for every single weapon this time around. For your rifles, the AK-74, it had a buff to the bullet velocity, as well as the CHF barrel and the marksman grip. The AIMs saw buffs all around the bullet velocity, ADS, sprint to fire, and ADS move speeds, while the attachments of the heavy stock and the combat stock all saw buffs as well. The AS Val saw a slight buff to the bullet velocity, definitely nice there. The CR56 AMAX saw a buff to the bullet velocity and the marksman grip, but did again see that nerf to the view kick strength and deviation as it did in Black Ops 6 multiplayer as well, making it a bit more apparent. The Cypher 91 saw a buff to the bullet velocity, marksman grip, heavy stock, and the combat stock. The Goblin Mark II saw buffs to the marksman foregrip, heavy stock, and combat stocks. Those big three that we talked about. The Kilo, same as the AMAX, buffs to the bullet velocity and the marksman foregrip, but did also see that view kick strength increased for the recoil, so a nerf to the weapon there. The Krig C saw a buff to the bullet velocity, marksman foregrip, heavy stock, and combat stocks. Model L, bullet velocity increase, and buffs to the CHF barrel and marksman foregrip. The XM4 then, rounding out our rifles, saw a bullet velocity increase along with the buffs to the CHF barrel, marksman foregrip, heavy, and combat stocks. So the big 4 on that one. SMGs, your damage range was increased across the board for your C9, as well as the attachment buffs for the 10mm auto rounds and the heavy stock. The Jackal PDW saw a damage range increase across the board, plus slight buffs to the lower torso multiplier and ADS speeds, while also buffing that marksman grip. The Compact 92 saw a few damage range buffs while making some smaller buffs to mobility and multipliers. The KSV saw a range increase across the board with buffs to the usual suspects of this patch, the marksman foregrip, heavy stock, and combat stock. The Ladra saw a few range buffs, and the same with the usual attachment buffs out of this update. The PP919 buffs to the heavy and combat stock there. The PPSH41 saw range buffs and a few mobility and ADS buffs, while also adjusting the marksman foregrip. The SOG saw range buffs, and the usual suspects in attachments also got a buff there. The Tonto 22, finally for the SMGs, saw additional range buffs, and the marksman foregrip got a buff and improvement there. Shotguns, your ASG 89 saw combat and heavy stock adjustment, while the Maelstrom saw a damage range increase plus mobility buffs, as well as the heavy stock and combat stock adjustments that we're used to from Black Ops 6. LMGs, an interesting one here is that all Black Ops 6 LMGs now inflict 12% more flinch in Warzone. So that's kind of a big deal when you think about it. Like, yeah, it's only 12%, but it's also 12% across the board on any LMG. Really interesting, and I'm curious to see if this sticks. But anyways, beyond that, the Fang 82 saw range adjustments where the medium damage range was removed, while the other two were increased now as a result of that max damage range's damage dropping. This is something you're going to see across the board with the GPM G7, PU21, and XMG. It is one of those things where that medium damage range was removed while increasing other attributes to compensate for that. But the Fang 82, before we move on, also saw buffs to the recoil, making it more manageable, mobility attributes like movement speed, sprinting move speed, ADS move, and firing speeds, and buffs to the heavy and combat stocks were as well made, along with the marksman foregrip. But you did see a nerf to the lower torso multiplier, so it's not all green here for that one. The GPM G7, again, that damage range was removed, but attribute-wise, same as the Fang as well. You had buffs to mobility and the view kick, but a nerf to the headshot multiplier this time. PU21, same thing, but while buffing mobility and other attributes like that, the lower torso multiplier was decreased this time around, and the XMG, same thing, mobility was buffed along with marksman foregrips, and the headshot multiplier was decreased, but those damage ranges, again, adjusted. Marksman rifles, your AEK, the burst fire cooldown was reduced, so that rate of fire was increased, a buff there, and the marksman foregrip was buffed. In fact, let's just get it out of the way now. The buffs for the marksman foregrip apply to the AEK, DM10, SWAT 556, TR2, Sarkov, and the heavy and combat stock buffs apply to the TR2 and the Sarkov. So this is something you see across the board, basically. Your DM10 only saw that marksman grip adjusted. The SWAT 556, again, saw another burst delay as a decrease, making that a buff. And then what we just mentioned, and the TR2 also additionally saw drop time improvements, meaning that that time that it takes for the weapon to go off screen when swapping your weapon, this is now in line with other marksman rifles. So a correctional buff, but nothing that gives any sort of edge. And finally, the sniper rifles of the AMR Mod 4 saw a damage range increase that can now one-shot headshot in its max damage range. This also reduced first shot recoil while improving the bullet velocity, upper torso and upper arm multipliers, and the leg multipliers. That's your weapon tuning here for Warzone, but we still have a little bit more to go in regards to gameplay changes because some gear was tuned. The wildcard of Bandolier has actually been removed from all modes. It's now no longer in the game, which is an interesting choice here with this, but we also saw perks adjusted of Veterans, slightly increasing the resistance to flash and stuns. Mountaineers fall damage reduction was increased to 35%, up from 33%. This just giving a little bit more, I guess, leniency if you're taking a fall from a higher building, but not necessarily killing you at that point. Equipment, your flash grenade flash angles were increased by 20%, meaning you have to turn a little more to avoid the effects, and the concussion grenade's max stun duration was increased, while the minimum duration was decreased. As for your gameplay items, the Gulag, players will now start with a single armor piece equipped in the Gulag. Buy stations, the locations in Verdansk have been shuffled for a, as they dubbed, fresh combat experience, and the total amount has been increased to 49 buy stations, up from 47 this past season. High value loot zones have been adjusted this season at Superstore, Quarry, and the Overlook, so higher densities and rarer loot chances are increased in these locations. Ground loot across Verdansk has been refreshed. Resurgence and Plunder players saw an update to lootable perks including Irradiated, Shrouded, Low Profile, Reactive Armor, the new perk of Loot Master, and Ghost. Then, your UI and user interface, the death recap widgets were updated to give additional details to showcase a precision airstrike, cluster, and bunker buster reveal, coughing to give away your position, tracker ADS auto ping, and alertness directional indicators. And then beyond that, with a few other challenge updates, that's essentially your Season 4 update in gameplay changes for Warzone as well. So that is Season 4 in a nutshell for Black Ops 6, multiplayer, zombies, and Warzone. That's where we're gonna wrap it up. Let me know your thoughts down below. Is there anything particular you like out of these patch notes? Anything you don't like? Feel free to drop your thoughts. But if you guys enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor, drop a like on it, and make sure to subscribe for more Black Ops 6 and other FPS coverage. I'd love to have you in the community. But again, do bear in mind, we are out of the office here for the next few days, so we have some content coming that isn't Black Ops 6 or anything, but some other FPS stuff I think you guys will enjoy. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care, and peace.